All right, we're back. It's COMP397, and it's week 5, lesson 5, part 2. We just talked about assignment number 2 in part 1. And now we're going to go back and talk about your calculator that we started to work on last week. And I want to talk about this. Why am I talking about a calculator? Because it talks about buttons and buttons you need for your slot machine, so they're kind of related. That's why I was kind of starting off with that last week. So let's go into that. Let's go into my GitHub. All right, and for those people who don't know my GitHub by now, you should. It's in my github.com/my last name, Tsiliopoulos. And if you go to repositories here, and if you look back on the top, it's COMP397 calculator, or you can, if you can't find it, you can also put in calculator, this one, COMP397 calculator. In there, just to let you know, for those people, to save you time, under assets, under images, I got all the assets we worked on last week. They're all done for you, okay? So you don't have to do that on your own, right? So let's do that. So please go into my, for today's tutorial, let's go into calculate COMP397 calculator. Fork me, please. Create your own little repository. Download it on your machine so we can move from here. I'll give you a chance to do that while I'm talking. Because I want you all to have the same setup as I have so that there's no discrepancies here. So we can all kind of work on it at the same speed. And for those people who are watching, I know some people don't like to do, they like to watch and then do later. That's fine. I don't recommend it. I think it's better for you to engage, only because it's, it gives you more practice. And when it comes to exam time, you're not going to be stymied on how we do stuff, right? Okay, so I'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. And while you're doing that, I'll start off my my project here. So again, I want to build a simple calculator, and I need to do a couple things. So the first thing I need to do is, let's pull up my little calculator example. So here's calculator, that's what I called it. I'm going to pull up this solution here, and again, you have this solution, it's on my GitHub, right? You can pull it down. And if you notice, there's several different images. I've got a background image, a calc container image, and if I hover over them in my version of Visual Studio, you can actually see what they look like. Take a look. All right, so if I hover over, you see the images. That's what they are, all the button images and so on. I've kind of cut them all out, every one of them. And this came off of our little wireframe example that we did last week. All right, so it's nothing that's new that we haven't seen before. Okay, so that's the first thing you have to look at. Let's take a look at what I've done from a project perspective. Again, what I want to do, I'll go to downloads, and maybe if I go to the proper place, under my calculator example, I have my calculator project, and I'm going to bring up my calculator, what it looks like completely. I've got my calculator.ping, just to show you. I'm using Fireworks, so you can use paint.net, GIMP, whatever. If you notice, what I've done is I've actually split everything up here, and by the way, you have this image as well in your assets if you download it or forked me on GitHub. So I have different layers here. That's all I've done, and you can use whatever program you like, but if you notice, each of the layers is separate, right? And I've put this image here together for a couple of reasons. One of them is, this is how I want to lay out my calculator, right? Well, I need to know if I'm going to lay out my buttons. Remember, you did our buttons last time, right? And when we put our buttons together, they always appear wherever, on a random location. We have to, or the top left corner of the screen is actually where they appear. I want them to be positioned exactly where I want them, in absolute positioning. And the only way I can do this, right, is if I know where I want to put them. So this is a little planning document for me, right? And if I zoom in here, whoa, that's too much. Example, if I look at this place where I'm going to put out it's going to show my text here. This is where this location is. If I click on this thing, it shows me that this box is going to be at 281, that's how wide it is, by 60 high, 281 by 60. And the position in X and Y coordinate wise is 20 by 30, so 20 across and 30 down. So that's where I want to put this box, right? Each of the buttons have these same coordinates. So if I lay them out here in a graphics program, and if I use relative or absolute positioning, I know exactly where my buttons are going to be. Well, this goes back to the slot machine idea. You need to know where all the controls are going to be on your slot machine, right? So the same holds true for these buttons. If I'm going to make a calculator, where are my buttons going to be? what they're going to be in these exact positions. Well, how do I keep track of this thing? Well, I like to use Excel. So I'm just going to pull up Excel right now, and hopefully it's not going to crash my system. Having some weird crashes lately. So let's create a new sheet in Excel one day when it comes up. Here we go. And I'm going to pull this up. Who does not know how to use Excel, by the way? If you don't know, it's okay. I'm not gonna get mad at you if you don't know how to use Excel. All right. So Excel is like it's a spreadsheet, like numbers on the Mac and so on. I'm going to just highlight everything here and make it so that it's 20 points, so that I can see it a little bit more clearly for you, and make the background all white, so that way it just looks, there's no grids. All right. And what I want to do is I want to put the symbol. I want to kind of write in what the object is. So this is my graphic, right? And then this is my, width and height as an example. I need to know these things, so just in case. So this is my width and my height. I'm kind of making a little spreadsheet. And this is my X position, right? So X position. And this is my Y position, right? And I'm just going to, zoom in here, and I'm going to kind of create a little grid. You can do the same thing in your favorite program. And what I'm going to do now is create a grid of cells that I'm going to start recording what my graphic name is, the width, the height, and the X position and Y position. Why? So when I go back to my code, I know how to position it. I keep track. I'm writing it down. You can use Word as well, or some other kind of note-taking app. That's fine. So I'm going to go into Fireworks, and I'm going to start looking at this one. Well, this graphic, I've named it. It's called my calc container. That's what this layer is here. And that's what I want to put here. So I say calc container. Calc. This is the container where it's going to actually show my result. I can actually call this results container or something else, right? I need to know my width and height. Well, I know down here by my graphic program, it tells me my width is 281 pixels by 60. So I put that in, 281 by 60. That's my width and height. I might as well center these things to make them look nice because I'm a stickler that way. Right, there we go. And my X position and Y position, like I mentioned before, from my graphic, it shows me that it's 20 and 30. So this is what it's going to be, 20 and 30. So these are absolute positions on my stage when I use Create.js. I need to know these things, right? Let's do the rest. So my 7 number, right? So this is 7 button. My 7 button is 60 by 60. I suspect all of them are going to be that way. 7 button, right? And this is 60 by 60. And my X position for my 7 button is 20 by 110. So 20 and by 110. This is good. This makes sense that it would be a 20 because my calc container and my 7 button, if you notice, are on the left edge of my graphic, right? All right, cool. So 7 button is cool. Let's do the 8 button. And the 8 button is going to be, again, a 60 and 60, 90, 110. So let's just do that. So 60, 60, 90, 110. If you notice, 110 is the same number. Why? It's the same level as the 7 button. It makes sense, right? And this would be the 8 button. Okay, so I do that for all of them, right? I'm not going to do that all here and make you guys watch paint peel, right? But you understand what I'm doing. I'm writing down the numbers for each of these graphic positions, so that way when I go back to my program, I can put them in. I can use these as absolute positions to program my buttons. Okay, I'm in a dilemma. Here's my dilemma. I'm going to create multiple buttons, and I want them all to have the same behavior, right? You guys have done COMP397, I'm hoping, yes, right? You guys know about object-oriented programming? Well, this is our first day we're going to do object-oriented programming today. We're going to do a couple things to make this go. That means I need a button class, right? I don't want to keep on saying, my button is equal to new Create.js button and then da-da-da. I don't want that to happen. I want to make a button class that encapsulates all the different things that I do, because it's not just making the button. I also have to change the pivot point. I also have to assign X and Y positions. I have to also assign any kind of button text. All those things for my button, I want them to be, into a button class. Okay, so that's the first thing. So how do I make classes in JavaScript? Well, remember we talked about this. JavaScript making classes is not easy to do. You have to use something called prototypical. They're actually prototypes, not classes. So let's do some examples of that. I want to refer you back to the document that I put up online for you guys for a second, and it's on your eCentennial. It's actually one of the first documents I put up there. I think I put it up. It's called JavaScript Fundamentals. Yeah. Let's go back to that one, right? Now, I put this JavaScript Fundamentals up there because for some of you who may not be used to programming in JavaScript, it's very similar to Java in terms of syntax. It's very similar to C#, but it's not C# and it's not Java. It's very loosely typed. It's not, you know, just like we talked about before. So let's go back. Different reasons why to use JavaScript. And I'm just going to go back. Here's the ABCs of JavaScript. So how to declare a number, just to recap. var is your variable. By the way, var, if you do var, like I said in C#, works. Try it out. Var, small numbers equal to 4. This will work in C# too. Why? Because the syntax is very similar. The old C# way was like this too, right? Now C#, you should be declaring your variables. Okay, so some examples that we put in here as before. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. When we talk about developing in JavaScript, we want to talk about, I'm just going to go back down here until we get to, I'll tell you which slide it's going to be, so that way we're into there. Syntax and statements are important. How we make while statements and all this kind of stuff is very similar. We've seen it before. Some comments, this is how you do comments. I talked about this before. I'm just going to go through and make sure that it's at the right step. If statements, very similar to that you've seen in C#. So the syntax is almost identical, right? We talked about hoisting last time and how that's bad. And here's all the reserved keywords. So on slide 55, these are all the reserved keywords in JavaScript, right? So these are the words that I highly recommend. And if you notice, there's a couple of them marked with an asterisk that are new in ECMAScript 5 and that are definitely something that makes sense in ECMAScript 6 and in TypeScript. Please do not use any of these keywords, extends, import, class, export, all these things in your code. That would be bad. Same thing with these other words like array, infinity, math, prototype, string, all these things that would be bad. So 55 and 56 are keywords you do not want to use in your code. All right. Variables and data types, again, we can talk about this. These are the basic data types: numbers, strings, booleans, null, undefined obviously is a data type, which is kind of weird, and objects, right? Well, objects is what we want to get to, and the way we do objects in JavaScript, I'm just going to go down to the next, those are operators. We're going to get back to this again. Skipping forward. Conditional loops. By the way, conditional and loops, all these things we talked about before, here's some conditionals. They're very similar. If you've programmed in a C-influenced language before, you know how to do conditions and loops and everything else, even with functions to some degree in JavaScript. So I'm here at slide 119, as you notice. So I've kind of put together a little package for you guys, almost like a JavaScript primer that I've already put up on eCentennial to kind of, as a reference card, to go look at if you don't understand how to do something in JavaScript. The other way, obviously, and the faster way, instead of looking up this big PowerPoint, is to go online and type in something if you don't know how to do something, because that's where we get a lot of our training these days, W3C schools. So let's take a look at a function. We talked about this before. A function name starts like this. So this is the way I do functions. However, you don't have to do it this way. Remember we talked about you can also create functions that look differently. You can use a function that has an alias. Well, here's something that you can do. Parameters in functions are working just like we normally see them in methods in C# or in Java, right? No difference. All right, here's an example of this is an example of how JavaScript doesn't need parameters. Even if you don't give JavaScript parameters in the function, you send parameters into the function, it'll still receive them, which is the kind of the flexibility that JavaScript has and the stuff that makes programmers go crazy. Because it's like, hey, hold on a second, I never defined a function here that takes parameters, and yet JavaScript is accepting them. How come? Because JavaScript is JavaScript. It's not C#, and it's not Java, and it's not C, and so it does different things. It actually has a built-in argument array that happens in the background that accepts different arguments. And this is an example of how I can send in a couple of arguments, and the first one is going to be in arguments 0, the arguments array, and the second one is going to be in arguments 1, because all arrays in JavaScript, just like they are in C# and in Java, are 0-based arrays, right? Who's an expert on arrays in the class? I want to put up your hand. You're an expert. Who's really good with arrays, right? Who's never done arrays, right? Okay. Who's really bad? Like they saw arrays in COMP397, but they never use them, right? You put up your hand there. By the way, most people are like what I just said. They've seen them in Comp 100. Maybe they talked about them in Comp 123, but they never used them, right? Well, the good thing is, the good message here is that JavaScript, even though it uses array-like objects, right, an array object as an example, they're actually, all arrays in JavaScript are lists. They're lists, which is a good thing. It's more powerful than just a regular array. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So again, you can send in 0 parameters, and you can use the arguments, the built-in arguments array, which is part of every function, to kind of to go through the array, the arguments dynamically. Okay, so here's return values. Same idea here. You can only return one value in JavaScript, just like you did before, unless, of course, you say that the result is equal to multiple numbers, and then you're going to return the result. Right, and you can do that too, because you can actually return multiple values in a method or function, as opposed to just returning one. Here's some options where you can return 2 different options. There are 2 different return statements. The return keyword is the thing that returns stuff back from a function, just like it did in methods in JavaScript and in Java. If you took those things, very similar syntax here. I'm just going to go over it really quickly with you. Right? Again, you can use my reference card here as something you can refer to. Here's something that's interesting as well. If you notice, I have a return right here. Will we ever get to this statement? Ever? No, because the return returns control flow back to the calling method. So if some other method or someplace in the code called my function, wherever it was called from, when we hit return, it goes back to that location. And so this statement here is never executed. And of course, people call me when I'm teaching. It's just the way. Let's continue. More on calling functions. I'm going to kind of skip forward a little bit. Here's something, another way of seeing functions. I kind of mentioned this before. The other way is an alias name for the function name, and then the word function with the parameter list. This is also very common. Actually, in fact, if anything, it's the most common way of seeing things on the web. If you see this and you're confused, it's just like saying var instead of var, just without using var, just saying function and the name of the function and the array list. It's the same thing. The only way we're doing here is we're saying I'm declaring an alias, a variable name, divnums, for this anonymous function. That's what this is really doing here. So this is actually an anonymous function because it's an unnamed function, right? And we're giving it an alias. I can do the same thing with the named function, by the way. I can make as many aliases, variables, that point to the same function as I want. And they'll perform the same way as if I was calling the original function. That's the flexibility of JavaScript. Actually, you can do that in C# as well, in some ways, and in Java. Here's where we get a little funky. Closures, right? Now, I want to mention closures. We're going to get back to this again. But closures are like these nested functions. So you have a function, here's called my function, and inside the function you have another function. Whoa, man. That's like crazy. Why would they do that in JavaScript? It's ugly, right? Well, the reason why they do this is because if you can make it so that, because remember, there are no classes per se in JavaScript. We use functions to define a class structure, right? So thinking about this outer function declaration here as the class. And inside you have the method, right? That's what we're saying here when we have these nested functions or closures, all right? Now we're going to get back to this, like I said. And the reason why I'm showing you this JavaScript is when I do TypeScript in a few minutes, right? You're going to see how beautiful it is and nice, and it's going to help us as opposed to doing it this way, which is a little bit confusing, right? Okay, let's talk about, we're going to go into methods. They're like functions, except we can use the dot operator, if you will, to get to them. I'm just going to skip through this a little bit. Let's talk about objects. Okay, so here's some objects. I've got var star, right? Star would be my variable name, is equal to the, wait, I'm using the new keyword here, and object. Object actually is a reserved word. And basically it says that now this star variable I can treat like a class object, an object that's made from a class. Okay, I don't have a class, but somehow JavaScript says that now I've referenced this, I created this as an object, which means I can assign properties to it. Here's the real way we do it in JavaScript. We never use this way, ever, right? This is the real way you see it. These curly braces. When you see this, var star is equal to these curly braces, I'm saying that star is an object. Star is an empty object, though, because star has no properties in it. Think about these curly braces as literal notation defining a class. Well, there's nothing in the class right now to define. It's like an empty class. Okay. Let's take a look at this again. Here's some literal notation for an object. This is one way we can do it. Hotel, here's some properties. Name, colon, and the value. Rooms, booked, right? And then I have this method, check availability, right, which is a function. This is called literal notation, and it's the most popular method that we use for JavaScript on the internet. It's also the most confusing method in the world. When you look at it, you're going to go, what the hell is going on? Kill me now, right? It's one of those, because you don't understand, especially when you have every developer is going to do their thing differently, and you're going to look at JavaScript and you're going to go, wow, that's ugly. Why is it like that? How come we can't just kill JavaScript and let it die a peaceful death and use C# or something else? Well, this is the first reaction you might have. But the great thing is that JavaScript is so flexible and it's very powerful. In fact, if anything, in many ways, it's more powerful than C# and Java, right? As you'll see. Java and C# have been around for a very long time. JavaScript has been around for about 20 years, right? In that range. C# and Java have been around for a little longer, or just around the same time. But at the end of the day, JavaScript has become and is becoming one of the most important languages that you should know as a developer. Okay? The reason for this is because of its flexibility. So again, look at this format, and I've kind of put it in your notes here. So you have properties that are detailed here, and your method that looks like here. Even though they're not called methods, they're called functions, this is acting like a method. So now that I've defined my hotel as an object, right, the hotel itself, when I declare this like this, not only am I declaring the class, but I'm also declaring the object, which is hotel. Okay, I'm not talking about inheritance yet. I'm just talking about the object. Here's the other one with something called constructor notation. This is another way we can do this. Var hotel is equal to a new object. Again, most times we don't see it like this, guys and girls. You won't see it like this. It's neater, it's cleaner, but you won't see it this way in examples online. But it also works. Both methods work just fine, right? This is pure JavaScript. There's no TypeScript here involved. Okay, here's my object, hotel. I use the new keyword, and I use objects, the built-in objects object, right? Which is the super duper class that exists for all classes and all objects in JavaScript, right? Actually, they have the same thing in C#, right? You have an object superclass in C# that all other objects and all other classes are inherited from, right? Well, same thing here. Object, this object here, is the superclass that everything else inherits from. Okay. So your hotel then would be your object, dot name, you're using dot notation, and you're assigning a value. Well, guess what you're doing here? Even though I've assigned it here, I'm creating the properties on the fly. As soon as I create the name, and I can put whatever name I want here, and I assign it a value, that property now exists. That's how flexible it is. And it's counterintuitive to a programmer. Typically, this is what we do. We create our class, we create our properties, we lay out our blueprint for the class, and then we create an object, and then we assign values. Here we're doing it all at once, right? There is no blueprint, if you will, the class. This is all done at one time, okay? Again, there's many methods, many ways to do things. But between these two notations, literal notation, which is very common, and almost, if you know JSON format, JavaScript object notation, this is what this is, right? And if you know this is more comfortable to you, both methods work just fine. Let's continue. So here's an example. Star, which is what we defined earlier, dot name, the dot notation is what we're using, right? Is we're assigning a value to the property, just like we normally would do. I can look for a property in an object if I don't know that it exists. I'm not going to go over that too much. I can add methods to objects, right? For example, the show method. Here's the show method. I'm using this keyword, right, to define inside of a function I can use the this keyword to assign a property a value. That's what I'm doing here. So then it works the same way with a function. I can say show, which is a new method. It's a variable that points to an anonymous function, which is now the method that belongs to star. Star being the class object. Again, very confusing for some people, right? I'm pointing it out to you so that you can feel awed and amazed when I show you TypeScript, all right? This is my show here, so bear with me as I do this magic trick, all right? So again, I'm not going to talk too much more about arrays and array methods, but it's important to take a look at what they can do. They're very, very powerful in JavaScript, and we're going to get into them a little bit later. I'm just going to make sure there's nothing else here, and there isn't. So really, you've seen in a nutshell kind of the rudiments of what it would look like for regular JavaScript classes. I also have another little piece that I want to add to that one. I'm going to put it up on your eCentennial later. But let's take a look and see what object-oriented programming looks like. Remember the terminology from the past, just as a review. Namespace is a container that allows developers to bundle all functionality under a unique application-specific name. Well, the namespace for JavaScript is the actual JavaScript file, right? So if I call it game.js or game.ts, the namespace right now, unless otherwise defined, if you define a variable out in the open, the scope of the variable kind of goes across the entire namespace. Okay, so it's not limited like we normally have, right? A class, the characteristics of an object, the instance of a class, property, and so on. I've got these, terminology. If you forgot what these things mean, I'm going to put this up as some terminology. All right, this is where we're going to get into. When we talk JavaScript, we're going to talk about this prototype-based programming, right? The style of programming that works for JavaScript. All right. Again, what it allows us to do is do something called behavior reuse. All right. It's not exactly object-oriented programming like we see in other languages. Not as of ECMAScript 5, this iteration of JavaScript that we're seeing right now. ECMAScript 6, which should be happening by the end of July. I think it's July. Well, they said June 29th, right? That's what they're saying, the ECMAScript Foundation, right? This year, when we switch over to ECMAScript 6, right? It's going to have actual class-based programming. This one is a classless prototype-oriented system. And the way it looks, just to make you look at it, is this. You've got your function person, right? And I've assigned a new variable name. This first name of the person, right, is equal to the first name that's incoming, right? And now I use this prototype keyword, prototype, right, to say that the say hello variable is part of the person class, which means this right here is the method name for say hello. That's what this is, which is quite confusing. You look at prototype and blah, 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 and this syntax, although it's not exceedingly difficult, it can be quite confusing for the beginner, right? You look at it and you go, wow, that's ugly. I don't like it, Tom. Why are you showing me these things? You're making my brain explode. I don't want this to happen, right? So let's talk about the TypeScript a little bit and how beautiful it is. I've already talked about it in a nutshell before, but let's talk about it in more detail right now. So I'm going to go to typescriptlang.org, which I invite you to go to with me. Let's go. I'm going to go to Learn, and I'm going to go to Tutorial. If I go to Tutorial here, right, it's going to show me step-by-step how to load and kind of use JavaScript, TypeScript for the very first time. Handbook is where you have your API definition. This is the way, if you want to learn about TypeScript and what TypeScript does for JavaScript, you learn about it here. It's like another little language, a sub-language for JavaScript. But actually, TypeScript is becoming very, very accepted nowadays, especially how Google and Microsoft have combined forces to create the language of choice for their new version of AngularJS. AngularJS, they made an announcement several months back to talk about AngularJS version 2. They're going to be using TypeScript, which is Microsoft's baby. So Google, AngularJS, and TypeScript, Microsoft, going to combine forces for the first time to say TypeScript is the language of choice. Now, once you see those two people combining forces, Google and Microsoft, you know TypeScript has a future, right? So this is not something that I'm going to teach you that's going to go away. In fact, if anything, TypeScript is going to be absorbed into the type specification for ECMAScript 6 and beyond. So you're going to see the same kind of methods. Right now, you're you guys, you as developers, sit in a kind of a middle period between two specifications, ECMAScript 5 and ECMAScript 6 for JavaScript, as the web is evolving, right? And as the web continues to evolve, we're going to move into a more object-oriented type of language, JavaScript, right? Okay, so this is where you get your API definition. So if you want to refer to www.typescriptlang.org handbook, please bookmark this one. I already have, I think, on your inside your links online. But if I have not, please bookmark this, because this is something that I'd like you to refer to when you're working with TypeScript. It's a very powerful language, and we're going to talk about that more today. Let's click on play here on the top here. This play link. Play gives you almost like a little playground where you can fool around and try things out, right? Instead of trying to program here on Visual Studio without opening up a whole new project and so on, Play allows you to have a little playground to check out JavaScript. So take a look on the left here, up here. I've got my person class. I'm just going to make this a little larger so you guys can see it, right? I've got my person class on the left. I've defined it with my class name and person, and I've defined a property, right, string of type string, and an age of number. And here's my constructor that I'm getting a string and a number for name and age, right? And I'm using the this keyword to say this name, which this thing up here, is equal to name, as in the variable, the local variable that's incoming, right? And this age, which is part of the person class, is equal to age. You should have seen this notation already in C#, yeah? Or something similar. Well, and here's moves. Moves is the method, right, as an example, in meters, right? He's moving in meters, or she's moving in meters. And I'm going to make an alert, which is this what the function does, this method, that basically moves. It says this name, whatever the name of the person is, moves X number of meters, right? And here's an example of var. I'm defining a person, Tom, as a type of new person. Hey, look, this looks like variable, very, very simple notation that we've seen in C#, right? But look at the JavaScript on the side, right? This is the JavaScript translation. This is the TypeScript. And as you can see, the TypeScript, although bigger, it's much easier to understand than this. Why? JavaScript uses something called an anonymous self-executing closure, right? So this is the result of this, right? This, easy to understand. This, you want to take a gun and blow your head off, right? It's a, you're like, what is this? You know, kind of thing for the average beginner programmer. So, and I'm being facetious here. Please don't take it as literal what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that this is more challenging for the average person. This is much easier, right? So this is why we're going to be using this going forward from today on. We're going to be using TypeScript as opposed to JavaScript. But however, most of the stuff we're going to be doing is pure JavaScript with a few changes. We're not going to be using prototypical inheritance and everything else. And by the way, it's changing anyway, right? It's changing more to this style of programming. Yes? Absolutely. Yes. 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 The only thing is that TypeScript can do more than JavaScript can do for us, because what we want to be able to do is do a couple things. So I refer you back to the documentation. If I go to Learn, and if I go to Handbook, right, I want to talk about modules. Well, what modules let us do is allows us to split modules across different files. We need to use the module keyword here. This is TypeScript now. And the name of the module. And in curly braces, right, this is in curly braces, the stuff that we want to put inside of the module, right? We need to use the export keyword to export anything that's inside the module so that it's available to the regular namespace, right? And we're going to do the same thing with our classes. Okay, so we're going to put a class in its own little module, and we're going to use the export keyword, right, to basically export whatever's inside the module so that it's available, it's exposed to the outside world, to the rest of the JavaScript, right? That's what we're going to be doing here. Again, I would refer you back to this as I go on my speedy way, and from now on I'm going to go from 0 to hero. So this is the class 5, where I make you guys into like developers now, web developers from just web designers, okay? This is where it's going to be. So if you think you're a web developer up to now, you're wrong, baby, right? We're going to get you into like web developer status right now. Let's go. All right. So back to our example, our calculator example, and this is the long-winded way I went. I went to like this, I went down a path with you, went into the forest, and came out of the forest back onto the trail. Okay, we're back onto the trail now, all right? Let's talk about this for a second. I need to create my button class. How do I do such a thing? Well, first, if you notice on the right-hand side, inside this document that I'm making called for my calculator, right? Here's my scripts, right? I have my library, lib, right? I have my typings. This is my type definition library. By the way, just as another aside, just recently, CreateJS released their latest versions of the libraries. Please don't use them right now, right? Not because that they're not good, but because what I'm going to be showing you up here is the older libraries from last week, right? Like literally, that's how these things change on the web on a weekly basis, right? So be careful. Okay, so I need to, in my scripts library, I need to create some other folders, right, to describe my modules because I want to modularize my code. Okay, remember we're moving from being a designer right now. I'm going to move you all into developer status, right? How do we do this? Well, we're going to right-click on scripts and we're going to make a new, we're doing this together, we're going to add a new folder, right? And the folder is going to be called objects, right? My objects module, or my folder, is where I'm going to keep all of my game objects from now on. You're going to see this, okay? You can make this a folder called, you can call it whatever you like. I like calling it objects so that you guys know this is where all my game objects are. In the future, as developers, you may choose other folder names and other folder structure to define your folders, all right? So objects, that's the first thing. I'm going to right-click on my new objects folder and go add, and I'm going to add a new TypeScript file. Here's my new TypeScript file. I'm going to call this new TypeScript file button, lowercase. So I'm going to make my new TypeScript file. Okay, cool. I've got my button. And I need to make a new class. Now remember, I'm going to wrap this in a module definition, right? So don't be afraid of what this is. All I'm going to do, when you see the notation the first time, it might be confusing, but I would kindly refer you to the online documentation of how I do modules, right? So you can understand what we're doing. By the way, the video will record my steps, but watch this anyway. Step 1, we create a folder. Step 2, inside the folder, we create a TypeScript file. Step 3, right? I'm going to make a new module. So I'm going to say module, right? The keyword. If you notice, it glows blue for those people who have the right version of Visual Studio. And I'm going to call this, right, objects, right? It's going to be my objects module. Not because it matches with my folder name, right? Objects, space, curly brace, right? So this is my container. This is my namespace for my module. It's called objects right now. And if you notice on the top left corner, look what it does. It shows me that my objects on the top left corner, if you look at Visual Studio, it has these two curly braces. This is actually an object that I've created. If I was to save this the way it is and translate it to JavaScript, it doesn't do anything right now because it doesn't. I haven't really done anything in my module. Okay, that's first step. Second step, I want to create my class. I need to use the export keyword because I want to export my class so it's available to the rest of my program. So I'm going to use export. In all other cases, if we didn't want to export my class, I would have to use the keyword class. And I'm going to use, of course, my convention for all classes that they're capitalized. So button, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in curly braces. So I've got my module, and inside my module, I have a class that I've called button. I'm going to save this now so you can see what it looks like on the right. So these translate to this. Ugly, beautiful, right? Ugly, beautiful, right? What's that? It's a lot of writing, but actually this is exactly what this is. All this is doing is TypeScript is taking this concept of class and converting it into something that works with JavaScript. This is what's going to be executed in your browser, not this. Okay, let's go back. So I'm going to go into writing the class now. The first thing we need to do when we write a class in TypeScript is oftentimes we need a constructor. So let's write the constructor. We use the constructor keyword for that, constructor. Do it with me, guys and girls. Okay, constructor. And inside the constructor, I'm going to have curly braces, right? Because the constructor is the constructor method. just to keep safe and sane, I'm going to start documenting stuff. So I'm going to say in here, it's going to be called, this is my constructor. I'm going to make it all in caps. This is my typical way. And I'm going to use a little bit of commenting sugar here to make it so that you see it's been separated. Constructor. Okay, good. This is neat. And you know what? I might as well, since I'm doing that, I might as well say, you know, button class here as well, because this is my button class. Now, in my module, I can put as many classes and objects as I want. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to put one class in every file. So I'm going to have multiple files. Each file is going to have its own class, but they might be part of the same module, because the modules are all going to have the same name if they're inside the same folder, right? So if I put multiple classes, button, label, blah, blah, whatever, inside my objects folder, they're all going to be part of the same module. But the module is going to be split over a certain number of files. Okay? Follow me here. You'll understand what I'm doing. Okay. So first of all, I've got this button class. Well, what do I need for my button? I need, for sure, right, some kind of button image. Right? That's what I need, the button image. And my button image is going to be what? It's going to be a bitmap, right? Because that's what I need for my button. Okay, so let's try that. So now I need a property, right? Or in your case, an instance variable is what it's going to be, right? So I'm going to call this, and you don't use the var keyword in your class definition here, okay? You don't need to do that. You just need the name of the variable, which is, in my case, image, right? The colon, and I'm going to define it as the type it is, which is a create.js.button, bitmap. That'll be okay. There we go, bitmap. Now I'm not defining it right now. I'm just saying that my image, this is my image, takes the shape of a bitmap that comes from the create.js library. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to kind of annotate this one to say instance variables, because that's what these are, right? Okay, cool. I got my image. Now I want to take my image, right, which is a create.js bitmap, and I want to kind of instantiate it in my constructor. The way we do that, of course, would be like this, right? I would say this, I have to use this keyword, dot image, right? And if you notice it pulls up, right, is equal to a new create.js.bitmap. That's what I'm doing, right? Just like we did last time. I'm going to pull this aside. Actually, I'm going to hide this for a second, right, so we have more room. And in my bitmap, if you notice, it tells us what we need. I need an image or URL string, right? That's what I need. So a string, and that's all I require. Well, so that means I need something called an image string. Well, I don't have that right now. Where am I going to get this image string anyway? Through my constructor. When I create my object, right, my class is going to request my image string as part of its constructor, right? And I'm going to take my image string, I'm going to put it inside this. It's going to use this as an image that I'm going to put up when I create my object. So here, I'm going to make it, that's the new variable. The local variable is going to be called image string, right? And it's going to be of type string, right? String, again, what if I didn't want to use these types? Could I ignore using these things? Yes, you could. You could. In TypeScript, you could choose to use them or not. TypeScript is syntactic sugar. It's a new language, but you still functions like JavaScript. If you don't want to use typings, you don't have to. Myself, from a tooling perspective, it makes sense. If we're using TypeScript, might as well use everything that it can do for us. Okay, question for you guys. Ali the Great. Ali the Great now, right? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, right? Because you're sitting right next to me, as always, right? And then I'm going to go to Sonia, because she came in late. Sonia the Late, right? Ali the Great. Ali the Great, tell me, this is between the two of you now, all right? Here, stand up, Ali the Great. Oh, yeah. And Sonia, you stand up too. Sonia, stand up. No, you can't pass, right? Sonia, stand up. Come on. All right, good. It's between the two of these people, right? This is the game, all right? The game is, what kind of, I'm going to say who answers first, okay? Who answers first? I want to see who's going to be fast enough, right? So tell me, right, what my access modifier for my image instance variable should be for this image. Tell me what it should be. Don't shout it out. I want them to tell me. So is it going to be public, private, or protected? Okay, go. Which one is it going to be? Come on.
I don't know why, but private.
Dun, 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 dun. Private. He says private. You don't know, right? You said private too? It's supposed to be public. Sit down, right? Right? Why? Because we can't access this image. If I make this access modifier private, Sonia, tell me what it will do. I'm going to keep hitting on you until you get this right. All right, so tell me what it's going to do. If I make it private, what's image going what's going to happen with the image from my class? Can I access image from outside? No, right? How can I use it if I can't access it? It's going to be very hard, and I'm going to need to access my image somehow or another. I'm going to have to access it, which means for now it's got to be public, which is bad. That's bad. I don't want to access my public property image, you know, for this. But for now, because I'm not talking about inheritance and how that works, right? It has to work this way. So I'm going to give you two examples of the button class. This one, which is going to be the bad one, and the other one, which is going to be the better one, right? Here's the bad example. So I need to make this public. And I can use public as a keyword because remember in TypeScript, and sorry to put you guys on the spot here, but you know what? When you come in late, you pay the price, right? Yeah, but you told me from the very first day, I'm Ali the Great, right? Or I'm Ali the Best. So from now, you're going to be paying anyway, right? And besides, you're immortalized on YouTube, so that's your payment, right? Okay, so let's go back to this thing here. So what we're seeing here is we've got this public modifier, access modifier, that makes image, our image instance variable, available to anywhere inside of our class, or outside of our class, right? This is bad because the typical, I'll tell you right now, the best practices, again, just to review best practices from C# and Java and everything else you've ever done, right? Private instance variables, public properties, and public methods. That's typically how we do it. Here we're making a public instance variable. This is bad, right? Shouldn't be, right? We can also call this a public property, but it's not really a property. It's an instance variable. Let's face it. So we want to try and reduce the public as much as possible. Okay, so that's the first thing. Now, we have instantiated it here, right? The image will be instantiated. However, we haven't added it to the stage, right? We need to do this separately, which causes a problem. It makes our class a little bit ugly at the end of the day, right? But we're going to get there. The other thing I want to do with my image, if you remember how I did this, I want to say this dot image, right, dot, and I remember it because it's a bitmap, I also have all the properties of the bitmap. My registration values, my regx, which is the focal point, the rotational point from my image, just like we did last time, is equal to, right, this dot image, right, dot get bounds. I'm getting how big the image is, dot width, right, times 0.5, right? I'm doing that here in the class, so every button that I create does this. I don't have to do this outside of my class. Once I do it one time, I save myself the typing of doing this every single time, and actually I can reuse my code over and over again. That's why we do classes in the first place, right? Okay, next one. This dot image, I'll go a little faster this time, times reg y, right, is equal to this dot image dot get bounds. Get bounds is just a method of the image bitmap class, right? Height times 0.5. So I'm saying half the width and half the height is the exact center of my object, whatever that is, and it's going to measure it. It's going to measure it in a I would say dynamically. So once it's created, it'll measure it. Okay, that's good. All right. Now the other thing I need is I want to be able to position my x and y values through my constructor, which means I'm going to have to take x and y. So I'm going to say x, right, which is of type number, right, because number is a type in JavaScript or in TypeScript, and y, which is also of type number, right? I'm going to ask for x and y coordinates for my button, right? So I don't have to do it later on in separate lines. Here are the separate lines. This dot image dot x, right, is equal to x, and this dot, oops, if I can type, this dot image dot y is equal to y, right? So I'm saying this x, which belongs to the image, you're going to get it from the constructor, the local variable that's incoming into the constructor. It's going to be here, and this x refers to this number here, whereas this is part of the image x, the x that comes from the image, the coordinate of the image itself, right? This is just a number that comes from my constructor. Okay, and the same thing goes for the y. So this way I've kind of told the, I can tell you where the position of all these things are, right? Okay, cool. It would be nice if I'm doing hover functions like I did last time. Remember I did this whole hover function where it would be nice if I can create this event listener here in the object as opposed to me doing it otherwise, because I'm going to have to do a separate hover function for each button that I'll create from now on. That doesn't make any sense to me. So now is our first method. Okay. So I'm going to say I'm going to call these public methods. I'm not gonna bother Ali and Sonia anymore because you know how it is, right? I don't want to put them too much on the spot. Make this public, and of course the method name, right, which is going to be called. And again, it's kind of like a hover or over, right? The over method. So if I do over, right, we'll just call it over, right? And or I can say on over. How about we call it on over? Because that's what it is, an on method, on over, right? And the on over method is going to take a type of event variable, right, of type createJS.mouseEvent. Right, we need to do that because we're going to put it like this. Okay, so that's how we do methods. We don't use the var keyword, you don't use the function keyword, you just use the method name, just like we normally would do, right? Okay, we're not going to define the body of the method yet. Let's do the on out. So when the mouse pointer goes over, we're going to call the on over method. And when the mouse pointer comes out of away from the button, we're going to call the on out method, right? So public on out, right? And we're going to make it a type an event variable. We're going to pass in there of type createJS.mouseEvent. Here's something. Will the public? Oh, I'm gonna have to make you. I'm gonna have to point to you now because you're up here. If we make methods in C#, do we have return types? Yes. Okay. What return type? I'm asking you now. Should the on over and on out method have? What's the return type that it should have? We could have it a type of number, a string, something, or void. Which one? Void. Good. How do we do that? Well, we do it like this. At the end of the method name, we go colon, void, whatever the return type is. Right? That's the syntax, guys and girls. All right? So void tells the function, this method here, that we should be returning nothing. It's not going to return anything. We don't need a return type. Right? If we specify a return type like string, then it'll prompt us with an error saying you forgot to put a return. Well, that's what this does. It just gives us tooling to do our methods. All right, cool. So that's the first thing. Okay, now we gotta call these things, right? Well, after this is going to be made, we're going to say this dot image. The image itself is going to have the event listener dot on. We're going to use the dot on event like we did last time, and we're going to say on mouse over, right? That's the mouse over is the type of event that we're listening for, right? Then we're going to call the event listener itself, or the handler, if you will, which is this dot on over, right? Which if you notice, if you've done it properly, it's going to show up. Yeah? We're using the this keyword because we're saying that it's going to be part of this class, this context that we're using here. And we're going to do the same thing for this thing here. This dot image dot on. The on is actually again an alias for add event listener. And we're going to say mouse out, the mouse out event, and we're going to say go to, when we have the mouse out event, go to mouse out, on out. Okay, you know what? It's also good practice to pass in the context. So I'm going to say pass in this. I'm going to pass the context into our event. Okay, cool. So these are the two events here. All I'm doing here is I'm saying, so here's, we're just going to add in the constructor, we're creating event listeners for mouse over and mouse out events. These are our handlers, our callback methods right here, right? And in here, what we're going to say is, okay, so remember what we did last time. On mouse over, we want to change the alpha of the image, right, to 80%, right? Let's say. So we're going to say this dot, and this is the problem, I can say image, right? This dot image dot alpha, right, is equal to 0.8, right? And this dot image dot alpha on out, we're going to put it back to 1, right? So we're going to put it to 100%. So this is 80%, 80% opacity, right? Or the other way to look at it is 20% transparency, right? And this is 100% opacity, right? Just to document what these things do. Okay, cool. We've added some code. I'd like to see this thing work now. Come on, this is too much. Hey, how come I didn't add in my mouse click event? How come I didn't put that in here too, right? Well, because every mouse click event is going to be different, right? So that's something I can't duplicate in my code. We're going to have to use that outside of our class. Okay, let's take a look and see what the JavaScript does for us. So this is the TypeScript, right? And when I save, this is the JavaScript. Take a look at the JavaScript. Do you see? Prototype on over, on out. It's not impossible to understand now that I've talked about it, right? This part here might confuse you, this bottom part, objects with a double pipe, objects is equal to an object. That's kind of weird. That's part of the anonymous self-executing closure piece that most people don't understand, right? However, it's done automatically for us. Okay, cool. So this is our class, and we've made it. Can I access this class right now? Nora, what do you think? Can I access this class right now in my code? No. You're shaking your head no? You're right. I can't access my class. Why? Because I haven't included it in my index.html file. I got to do that next. Let's do that next. This is step number 5 or whatever it would be. Step X. Okay, I've got my button class, but I need to include this button class in my index.html. Here's my index.html. Where do I put it? Here are all my classes, all my classes from my CreateJS library and my stats. Here's my stats up here. Where do I put my button class? Do I put it before my game script or after my game script? Before, always before, because you want my game to have access to it, right? So I'm going to put it in game scripts, right? But before my game.js file. So I'm just going to drag and drop this thing in here. So this is like the next step. If I don't do this, I don't have access to it. Even though it's here in my library, I've written it nicely. It looks beautiful. It's useless right now until I connect it, right? Okay, so now I've connected it. Okay, that's good. One more step. I need to go into my game.ts file, and here's my reference. If I want to be able to use it, guess what I got to do? I got to reference it. So I got to take my button, and I got to put it, kind of drag and drop it in here as well. Okay, let's take a look and see how this functions. I want to create my button now, right? And if you notice, my pink button, I have a pink button already because of Sonia. Sonia made us do this pink button because her favorite color is pink, right? I guess. And pink button is a CreateJS bitmap, right? Okay, I want to create a new button called pink button. I'm going to use my own custom button. Let's try this out for the first time. How do I do it? It's in the objects module. So how do I access my button? How about the guy in the back who so brilliantly asked the question? How do I access my button? What's your name? The guy in the back. Yeah, you. Sahil. Tell me, Sahil. How do I access the button from my button class? What do I start? I want to make my pink button. I want to define it as a type, our custom button. How do I do it? What's my syntax? Huh? I'm going to be using the image, but right now I want to define pink button as our type of object, our button class object. How about this? Objects. That's the first piece, because we're accessing the object's namespace. Our module is another namespace, right? Objects is the first thing we have to choose. Next, dot. And look how button comes up, right? This is good. Okay, good. That's where we end it for now. Objects.button. Okay, well, this is, look at, I have all these errors down here, man. Come on, this is crazy errors. Let's see if we can take some of these errors away. All right, so I'm going to go down here, right? And, well, I don't need this pink button over or pink button out anymore because I've already defined it in my button class. So I can get rid of both of these functions. Right? And let's continue. Here's my pink button. Well, it's not a CreateJS bitmap type, right? That's not right. Let me just get rid of this so you guys can see it. Right? It's not a CreateJS bitmap. That's wrong. It's of type objects.button. So I'm going to get rid of this. Objects.button. And I still want to pass in this pink button thing here, right? It's giving me a bit of an error. How come? How come? How come? Right? It says supply parameters do not match any signature of the call target, right? We're going to talk about that in a second. Because what am I sending to it when I'm sending in this get result? It's a blob, actually, is what it is, right? That's what I'm listening for, this blob, right? It's supposed to be of type string, assets.getResult, right? That's what I'm supposed to be getting, but I'm not. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, let's get to the next piece. Regx and regY, well, that's not right, right? Because I've already done these two things, right? Because I don't have to do this, right? Here's the other thing. My x and y coordinates, I got to put those in there. So that's something I got to put in. So I got to go comma. This is where I'm talking about that thing that I said, 160 by 270, right? Because it requires, my class requires x and y coordinates to go to my button. So I don't have to do this anymore, right? Okay, I can't add child my button. Why can't I add it like this? Because pink button means nothing. That's why. It's the image that matters, right? The image. I'm not adding my pink button. My pink button is just an object. That means nothing. It's not a display object. Hold on. What did I just say? It's not a display object. Oh man, I did all that work and I can't add it to the stage. That sucks. First of all, I don't need these two things. Let's get rid of this, right? All right, so now I have this, right? I've cut down on my code a little bit. I can't do this on function. Where should I be doing my on, my add event listener? It should be on the image, yeah? So I need to do this. This is why that public image, Sonia, going back to what I told you before. So I'm going to say dot image, right? Dot on click, right? And the same thing goes here, pink button dot image. Well, that doesn't look right. I mean, it'll function. Let's check it out. So if everything I did right, correct, whatever, I've added my image to my stage. It should be exactly the same as I've had before. Let's save and see what the JavaScript is going to be like. This is my JavaScript now, right? Lots of JavaScript on the right. Don't worry about that, right? This is my pink button. I've got these couple things here, right? And this is what it is here. These three lines now are my button, right? That's much better than before, yeah? Okay. It's 160 by 270. Let's run this thing and see if it works. Hopefully, I won't have an error, and then I don't have to blame Ali or anybody else. Hey, here's hello world, but wait a minute. Where's my button? Right? Well, hold on. I don't understand. How come this is not working? I'm going to go to more tools. I'm going to go to JavaScript Console, right? And it says, failed to load resource. The server responded with blah, blah, blah. My game is running. Uncut type error. Cannot read property of width of null. Man, what the hell? Right? How come this is not working? How come? Well, there's a couple problems. Let's go back to my pink button. Do I even have a pink button image anymore? I've deleted it, right? So that's one thing. So this is a part of my code, right? So let's go back into, I'm just going to stop debugging here for a second, and so I can show you the error, right? I'm going to go back into, I'm going to pin this thing here up. I'm going to go into my assets, and I've deleted my pink button from in here, right? Because I don't need it anymore. Oh, wait, there's my plus button, and there's some other buttons. Well, let's add in a button like the plus button. So instead of my pink button being pink, you know, we'll make it the plus button. And I'm going to do that where? Up here where I define my manifest. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to call this thing plus button. Let's just do this properly. This is our first button we're going to add in our calculator. We'll make this the name of the button, plus button, because this is the path now to our button, right? This is good. And of course, if we did it here, we might as well rename our pink button. And how do we do that? In Visual Studio, the right way is to refactor it, right? So right-click, refactor, rename, which is F2, right? And we change our pink button to plus button, right? And press OK. And now everything else looks good because our plus button has replaced pink button. Now this is not replaced, which means we have to replace this one too to plus button. Okay. I've changed my code. I'll unpin this thing and I'll run it, and if everything goes well, I should have my plus button showing as opposed to my pink button. There it is. Okay, now if everything works well, if I hover over it, I should get that hover effect to my plus button, which is part of our class. So we've been successful, ladies and gentlemen, to make our first button class. But it's pretty darn ugly, huh? It's pretty darn ugly, our class. And let me finish off this this little piece here we've been talking about, and we'll finish the video too, by cleaning up my class a little bit and using inheritance. Okay, let's stop recording. First thing I got to do, I'm going to go back in my Solution Explorer and pin that up, right? And in here, I'm going to go back to my button class, which is right here. Let's take a look at my button class. Here's my button class. Well, this is nice. I'm using image, but man, I want it so when I use my button, I want to add the button, not the image. So what do I need to do? I need to make this class a bitmap, right? And how do I do that? Well, in TypeScript, it's beautiful. And this is where I like code, you know, how TypeScript works. Next to my button class, I say, I use the extends keyword. Follow me here, guys and girls. And I say, I'm going to make my button class of type createjs.bitmap. Now I'm using inheritance. I'm saying, let's inherit everything that comes into whatever is a bitmap. Well, my button is going to be a bitmap, which means I don't need my image. So now, Sonia, the problem is solved. I don't need to have this public instance variable anymore, right? Because my button is an image, right? And because I use my constructor, I need to use something called a super, right? Because I use constructor, it says, if you hover over what it says, I need to use a super call to my superclass. So here's my superclass, right? And I'm sending that image string over to my superclass. That's what I'm doing, right? Okay, cool. Well, I don't have an image anymore, and you know what? I don't need an image anymore, and I don't even need this line anymore. See this new createjs bitmap? Because as soon as I declare my button as a bitmap, this is inferred. I can get rid of it. Because my button is a bitmap, right? And I'm not going to say image anymore because I don't need image. I can just say this.regex because my button is a bitmap. So therefore it has already, because it's inheriting from the bitmap superclass, regex, reg-y, and x and y value. So I can get rid of image. Let's do that. So there is no more image, right? In fact, everything I do from now on to my button happens to the button itself because the button is an image. It is a display object now. Okay, almost done making my changes. Okay, cool. I'm going to save. And now let's take a look at how it interprets my extends keyword because I'm actually using inheritance for the first time. By the way, inheritance in JavaScript is crazy, right? Take a look at this. So this is my object, right? I'm using my my class, and my class is actually using the extends keyword, which is inheriting this createjs bitmap object, right? And I'm good to go. We have errors because if we haven't done things properly, and let's go back, I'm just going to save everything, and go back into my game.ts file. Well, guess what? I don't have an image anymore, so I don't have to do this, right? And I don't have to do this, right? Because that is, the button is an image. It's a bitmap. Because remember, it gets that is a relationship now. When I inherit from the class, the superclass, I inherit all properties and methods of that superclass. So now my button, my custom button, is an image, or is a bitmap. And now it looks much cleaner. Right? And now I can add the plus button itself right to the stage as opposed to just the way it was done before. Let me just refresh to make sure it works, and there it does. And I still get the same functionality right here, right? And we're good to go. And that, my friends, is how I want you guys to do use classes in JavaScript and TypeScript. What we're going to be doing is we're going to create our button, our other classes, and we're going to use inheritance because we're going to inherit the superclasses for bitmap and for sprite and for everything else we're going to do in the future, right, into our new classes. So that way it becomes a display object. It's not just a container object. Because before, my object, even though I made a button class, it was just a container that had an image property. right? That's all it was. Yes?
Professor, there's two ways. Which way is better?
This way.
This way?
Mm-hmm.
How about if we include a small icon in our button?
Yes, you could. Then you can actually include, there's all kinds of things you can do. You can do that, these are nice ideas, but you can make it so you can do whatever you like. And you can make it so that it's a container again if you like.
If our button include a small icon, so my button should have two images, right?
Then you have to make your own, they have to go the other way. You couldn't make your button you can't extend the button, right? You can't extend the class anymore unless you add it in. You can still extend it, right? But you can have a second image option, right? And when you say this dot whatever, it's pertaining to the bitmap itself, but you're adding an additional image property. Okay, but you can still do it. Okay, let's stop there and take a short break, right? And we'll come back and do more with our buttons. We'll make our calculator finally. All right, so I'm going to go back here and stop.